Hey, what's up, everyone? It's your boy Tyler. Welcome to another episode of Draw and Talk, where we talk about making comics and indie comics. And I got a regular guest on again. His name is Drew Edwards. He's the creator of Halloween Man. I know we've talked about that comic a bunch, but get this, he's got another issue coming out, and it is freaking amazing. I read it the other day, and we got the cover artist on as well. Her name is Chandra. And thanks so much, for being on.
Thank you.
So today we're going to be talking about using folklore and mythology in your storytelling, which is a really cool topic, and it's really it's something that I like to do in my own personal work, and I think it's very apparent in Halloween Man that Drew uses a lot of different folklore and mythology in his work. So real quick, Drew, would you like to tell us a little bit about Halloween Man? Hollowtide Part 1, because this is a one, like I said off air, like I really liked the story and I thought the art was perfect on it.
Well, thank you. First of all, outside of Chan here, shout out to my my creative team with April Gardenia, who did the colors and the letters, and Lewis and Azuzi, who did the pencils. Beautiful work on this. Halloween Man Hallowtide was kind of my attempt to do the ultimate Halloween Man story. And if I had to like boil everything down to like the bare essence of what this comic is supposed to be about and what the character is supposed to be about, and it takes place during what is actually the All Hallowtide. It starts on Devil's Night, it goes through Halloween, and it actually ends on All Saints Day. And so there is this concept of what Hallowtide is and what that means from different cultures, but also has a very interesting villain, which I have adapted from English folklore, which is this character Spring Hill Jack. And we do an interesting version of him, and I think people will get a kick out of that. And even people who are unfamiliar with the legend of Spring Hill Jack will enjoy it. Now, this is a 2-part miniseries. It is separate from the 2 Halloween Man ongoings that are on Comixology. It's a new thing, and if you're not familiar with Halloween Man, you can jump right in because we recap everything at the beginning of every story, obviously. But if you are a longtime reader, I think you're going to get a kick out of this one because we really pulled out all of the stops to create something that is perfect for this time of year.
No, that's awesome. And right now, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to screen share my screen so everyone can see it, and I'm going to lock on so that everyone can check this out. So this is let me make this bigger. This is the beautiful cover that was drawn by Chandra. This is incredible. Your art is amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Look how cinematic that title looks. Hallowtide Part 1. So right there, guys, the art, we've got the incredible, I like this. I like that you guys do this, the just so you know. Like, that is so smart for an indie series to do this. Take note, everyone. To do this, especially to get in newcomers. Halloween Man's been going on for so long. It's important that if a random person were to randomly grab this comic, they need to be recapped with a little bit of something so that they're caught up. So this is a great way to attract new readers. I just want to throw that out there. And yeah, like, guys, look at the freaking art on this. It's super well done. I love how Lucy is. I feel like every comic I see her in, she's looking more and more and more like your wife. Like, she just slowly, like, I know that she was kind of inspired, but she's slowly just like, as the next comic is just gonna be like her.
Lewis's Lucy looks a lot like Jamie, and he's really good at resemblance. And actually, Jamie actually owns that dress.
Yeah, I think that's why, because I think I've seen a picture on Instagram. I was like, that's Drew's wife right there.
Yeah, he must have been looking at pictures from. She's in a band called Danger Cakes, which Chandra has actually done merchandise for. So hello, cross promotion. Yeah, and we I think Lewis must have saw that dress on Instagram and just like, okay, I'm drawing that. So yeah, it really does look like her, and I enjoyed seeing that, and people seem to like that. So
what I liked about this comic was it felt like you said, it was the spirit of Halloween and of what Halloween meant. If it was like a new reader, this is what the series is all about. I mean, right here we've got the kids dressed up as the Ghostbusters. We've got the Little Mermaid, and then this is who you were talking about, right?
Yes, that is Spring Hill Jack and all his spooky glory. We had a lot of fun working on the designs. Now, if you were to Google Spring Hill Jack or research Spring Hill Jack, you would see that there was a lot of not only was he a popular figure from English folklore during into the Victorian era, but he was in sort of precursors to pulp novels and comic books called penny dreadfuls. And so we were able to look at a lot of these old penny dreadfuls and look at the artwork and kind of like, okay, well, if this guy was like a real guy, what would he look like? And we went from like a lot of different influences outside of the penny dreadful covers. We looked at a movie called The Phantom of Paradise, which is kind of a cult. Yeah, see you acknowledging that. It's kind of a cult classic, a very odd horror musical. But the character also wears this very strange looking helmet. So we put a little bit of the Phantom of Paradise in there, and Freddy Krueger a little bit. And, then ultimately, I think the thing that through the discussions I had with Lewis on his design was Jack Skellington, because we wanted him to have this ridiculously long limbs, which I think makes him very creepy. And the fact that he just towers over Halloween Man, because what you really have in this comic is sort of, you talk about the spirit of Halloween, it's sort of the warring spirits of two different aspects of Halloween, and them kind of fighting over the turf, so to speak. And so I wanted a character that just looked more powerful than Halloween, because Halloween Man he may be the quote unquote hero, but he's scary looking. So I wanted a character that was more fearsome looking than him, but also with kind of a sense of whimsy about it too, because it is Halloween and you want that.
No, yeah, for sure. Real quick, I just want to make a shout out to those who are watching. We got Justin in the chat and we got Scott Bruckner. Thanks, guys, for watching. If you have any questions for these two awesome creators, hit me up in the chat and I will ask them. Chandra is an amazing and accomplished artist. So if you have any art questions, ask her. She's working with some big people these days. And then Drew has worked on a ton of comics. This Halloween Man's the big one. And he even did a crossover with
Hack Slash
for Image Comics. So if you have a question, put it on. But I think Scott put on the chat when we were talking about the section where it's what you need to know. He said this might be good for other projects that I work on, and I agree, because that just really helps your community grow. One thing I liked about this comic, and it's kind of a spoiler alert. No, I don't want to spoil it, but I like what you said about creating a character that could beat Halloween Man. I think what I was about to like say with the pumpkins. That's all I'll say on that page. And that actually surprised me. I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm not 100%, understanding. I didn't understand the whole entire mythology of Halloween Man. So when a certain part happened, I was like, oh, is there any coming back from this? So I was really entertained by that. So before we talk about how you put in the mythology and the folklore into this comic book, Chandra, how did you get into art, and like, what is your story?
Okay, so the story goes like this. How I got into art, my mother says I could draw before I could walk. So believe maybe that, or take it with a grain of salt, whatever. But all I knew of like my early life was drawing. and like making my own comic books with my cousin Lindsay Sebos, who is also a comics creator, just like myself. Only she does manga inspired work, and I'm more darkly spooky. But so I got into the industry probably around 2007. I worked with another Drew Roush, on his book Soul and Grey. I did the coloring for his second graphic novel, and that's how I got in. And then I got my own book called The God Machine with Archaea, and that graphic novel came out in late 2010. And I'm sorry to all my fans who may be watching that I have not done a follow-up just yet, but it's happening, I promise. But I wrote and drew all of that myself, so I'm a storyteller as well. And I've done many other things like Fraggle Rock for Archaea and Jim Henson. I've worked on a couple of graphic canon books, which we adapted a bunch of different stories. In particular, I did T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, which was not easy. That was probably a fool's decision to try to adapt something of that caliber into comics, but it turned out really well. And currently I am working with Storm King Productions. That would be Sandy King, wife of John Carpenter. They're responsible for horror books and stuff like that. So for once, I'm to be doing a very spooky, very gory comic coming up, and I can't wait to share that with the world whenever that happens, that I can actually talk about it. And yeah, I do art, I write things. I'm Chandra free.
And where can people find you? On are you mostly on Twitter, mostly on Instagram?
So I'm a variety of places. You can find me at spookychan.com and at spookychan on Twitter and on Instagram. And you can also find me on the Facebook, Chandra Free, or the Chandra Free if you don't want my personal page, but they're all the same. Whatever.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So how did you two get in contact to create such a beautiful cover?
DeviantArt.
Yeah, it's funny, I was kind of making jokes about DeviantArt earlier, but I discovered her work on DeviantArt, and I thought it was so appropriate for not only Halloween Man, because obviously she does spooky things, but particularly like she had all these characters that were very, like I was saying earlier, very long and lean. And so when I was thinking about particularly Spring-Heeled Jack, I was like, oh, she could nail this character. And you know, especially on that first cover, it's funny because you don't actually see that much of Jack. You just sort of see him around Lucy and Halloween Man, but she boiled it down to such a great essence. And you know, when I contacted her, we started like talking over, I guess Gmail. I can't even remember. It was several months ago now. But we obviously have a similar passions for the morbid and the odd. So we hit it off, and I actually think this is probably a collaboration that I would like to see continue, because I like her interpretations of my characters a lot. And you know, we had a lot of fun, you know, working on, you know, not only the cover that you showed, but the second cover, which has a strong Vertigo era Doom Patrol influence.
Well, I like that.
Yeah.
So, real quick, I have a question for you, Drew. And before we hit up the mythology and folklore, what made you decide to do a little like a separate mini like story outside of the main comic? I think it's a really smart idea, but I'd love to get your take on it.
Well, there was two reasons for that. One, which is a very unromantic, boring thing to say, but that's what Comixology like. They wanted that when I showed it to my Comixology rep. they said, because I had pitched it to them as just issues of the regular series, and they're like, well, we think this is strong enough to where it should be on its own. And I kind of agree with that, because what I've been doing over the last few years is really kind of focusing on one shots, like what we did with the Lucy special and what we just did with the Bat City special. Things that are, I'm able to take a lot of time and put a lot of effort into, because when you're an indie, the idea of doing a monthly book gets really grueling, and being able to just take that little bit of extra time to make something look polished is nice. And so since we weren't having to put it as part of the ongoing, we were able to take that little bit of extra time with it, and also really tie it in as a seasonal tie-in, because the first issue comes out next week and the last issue is actually going to come out on Halloween. So like, how perfect is that? Like, this is kind of like the comic book equivalent of like an old Halloween special from when I was a kid, and they would run, it's the Great Pumpkin or something, just like it's a good seasonal tie-in.
No, for sure, for sure. All right, so we've got some questions, and we got some people in the chat. I'm going to do this in the correct order so that the show is coherent. We got Britton. He says, hey, what's up? Hey, Britton, what's up? Thanks for being on the show. We got Christopher Kronk. Anyone up for an over/under on how many cats this nice lady has? I'm saying 3. Chandra, how many cats do you have?
1.
1. So if you thought anything more than that, you've lost.
I'm not a crazy cat lady, I promise. If anything, my cat is crazy, not me.
And then we got Chuck Pino here, and this is a perfect segue to our discussion. Chuck Pino, you're talking about mythology and folklore. Do they have any favorite creatures or folk stories that they would like to attack that they haven't been able to yet? So I'm going to start with Chandra. Chandra, is there any, what's your favorite, creatures of mythology or folklore? And which one of those would you like to tackle, in a story?
That's interesting. I mean, they're all pretty spectacular. Currently, I'm kind of doing, is it Krampus? I always fuck it up.
Krampus?
Krampus. He's pretty neat. Cause he's doing Santa's dirty business, taking care of children, all the bad ones. I've actually done some illustrations recently for project I can't talk about because my client is wants it to be seasonal ready and whatnot, which is unfortunate because it's for a music video and it's pretty cool. These things.
The Krampus is definitely one that's on your radar. Currently.
Yeah, and in my own book, The God Machine, I tackle Satan and gods and things like that. So I come at him from a different perspective. It's kind of like what you would expect from a Christian viewpoint, but also kind of twist it. Why is he there if you've got 2 other gods? There's good God and evil God. Why is there a Satan? So that's my little riddle that I've put out there with my book. Eventually I will get into further lore of that, but I like taking expectations of things and twisting it and making it different, especially with gods and monsters and creatures and whatnot. And just also the idea of a monster, it being something spooky and harmful and whatnot. I like to twist that as well and make it it just looks spooky, but it's actually quite nice, you know. In my book, a spooky monster comes out of the mirror and asks for floss. That's all he wants. He needs dental hygiene. That's important. So I mean, that's I'm hungry for any kind of monsters and creatures and things like that, and I like to just twist your expectations.
Well, one thing that I like about that, what you said, is I think of the Disney movie Maleficent. How the reason why I liked that movie so much was you had this evil character who everyone has known for years as this evil character, and then they twisted it and they showed, you know what, she's actually a really good person. She's in a really crappy situation. I thought that was great storytelling, and I want to check out once we go off air, I want to check out your God Machine, because right now I'm currently doing a Kickstarter for my comic book Demons, my graphic novel, and it's about demons and monsters, but it's also in the later arcs we'll talk about. I've got like a satanic trinity that rivals, the normal Christian trinity, and just the different ideologies with those. So if you haven't backed, hit the link up in the description. It's also in the chat, everyone. So yeah, those are awesome. Drew, what creatures of mythology or folklore are your favorite, and which ones would you want to tackle? I know you've tackled a lot in your Halloween Man book. Is there one that you haven't tackled yet?
I haven't. I love American folklore a lot. I love all the European stuff, obviously, and I have an affection for Greek mythology and Norse mythology and Celtic mythology. But there's something about these sort of like American, like stuff that's organic to America that I really enjoy. I guess because like I'm around it. Like I just actually spent on the weekend of my birthday, I was up in Sleepy Hollow, which I love the Headless Horseman. I've always been very fascinated by that character. And in fact, Texas has its own Headless Horseman called El Muerto, who was a decapitated horse thief who the Confederate Army chopped off his head and tied him to his horse and sent the horse riding around the hills in Texas, thus starting the legend of a headless ghost. But of course, Sleepy Hollow has the most famous Headless Horseman of all time. And being there and seeing how all in that town is on the Headless Horseman, like it's even on their cop cars, it's their sports team, and how much they love the Headless Horseman, because I'm an Elvis fan. The sideburns might have tipped that off. I've been to Memphis many, many times. I guess
there you go.
Yeah. I've been to Memphis many, many times, and the people in Memphis have this weird sort of relationship with the Elvis stuff. Like they like that it's good for their local economy, but you can tell they're kind of sick of talking about it. Sleepy Hollow is not like that. They love the Headless Horseman, and it was wonderful. I would recommend if anybody wants to go. It's a good weekend trip, and the historical stuff there, particularly the cemetery, is wonderful. And I actually have done the Headless Horseman in Halloween Man. I've done El Muerto since Halloween Man is in Texas, but I'm actually kind of trying to rack my brain for a popular monster that I haven't used. I've done all the big ones, I've done werewolves and vampires, and I've even done dwarves. I've done I just did on our Christmas special last year. I just did some Celtic folklore with the king of the fairies, and I think I would like to do the Jersey Devil one day. Actually, now that I'm thinking about the Northeast, that's an incredibly odd myth and an incredibly odd looking creature, and it's one that I don't think has been picked to death yet. Like there hasn't been a lot of Jersey Devil stuff. Like she mentioned Krampus or Crumpus, or again, however the heck you say it. I would like to do that one day, but I would want to do it in a way that's so very because now that you see that character a lot, I'd want to the movie that they just did was really, really good. I would want to anytime I'm doing something for Halloween Man, my main thing is like, okay, what is the Halloween Man version of this? How are we going to do this different than everybody else?
So how do you real quick, I've got someone, I got Chuck Pino. Is the first monster that you were talking about, I think you were talking about the Sleepy Hollow, but is it like the Wendigo? What's a Wendigo?
So the Wendigo. Go ahead.
No, you.
Oh, me?
Yes, you.
Nice. Okay. So the Wendigo is this. I'm probably gonna screw it up. This antlered creature that's also initiated and like preys upon people to like take in their life essence. I could be completely wrong. I'm half
Well,
remembering
right
some great
now
things, but
you're doing a great job describing it. I don't know anything, but this is it.
yeah, that's it. They use that symbology of that creature in the television show Hannibal, and it was a kind of I think it's a cannibalistic creature. So that's why it ties into Hannibal
That was
so
supposed
well.
to be a Wendigo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That makes so much more sense. The symbolism on that. I always just thought it was a
yeah.
deer.
Well, the way one becomes a Wendigo is it's when a member of a tribe eats one of their own tribesmen. So, it is incredibly appropriate to Hannibal, which, by the way, if you haven't watched Hannibal, watch Hannibal.
Wow, what an incredible freaking show. And it only got
Oh my
3
Lord.
seasons.
Oh my god, I just started rewatching it last night, and I'm like, it's one of my favorites. It's my second favorite show after Venture Brothers.
You know what I did? I was so scared. I'm so scared that I will lose the opportunity to ever like stream it for free that I bought the discs. That's how like I saw it. It was like
Hannibal.
it was like 70% off at Barnes and Noble. I was like, well,
Oh, wow.
if they ever give this up on streaming, I at least I have it. It's such a good freaking
Right.
show.
I have it too, but it just happened to be like streaming so much more convenient. But it's like just watching it, and like I had subtitles on because I can't play things too loud. But it's like just the dialogue is so good. It's so spot on and sets up everything, and it's so theatrical.
Mm-hmm. And if you watch it from season 1, you understand, like if you watch it over and over, you're like, holy crap, they had this whole thing planned.
Oh yeah, and they had it planned for like 7 seasons. Brian Fuller was going to bring in Clarice and the whole Silence of the Lambs plot line was going to go through, and like they were working on getting the rights to Clarice because that's tied up with Fox, I believe. Is it Fox? I think it's Fox. I could be wrong. Anyways,
Yeah,
but
that sucks that
they had plans. Oh, heartbreaking. But like that last episode, no spoilers, but they had Susie So in the background singing, and like the whole entire thing coming to a close, and just like Susie's voice is just like haunting and like, oh, be still my gothic heart.
Yeah, it was perfect. So segueing into this, Drew, what you said, whenever you think of a character or a monster you want to put into the Halloween Man universe, you think about how does this tie in with Halloween Man? How does this creature look in the Halloween Man universe? So how do you do that without just like copying it, like, oh, vampires suck blood? How do you make these monsters, or whatever you folklore mythology, into your comic book? How do you make it unique?
Well, I'll use vampires as an example, because you just said vampires, and it's a monster everybody knows, and I love vampire movies. And I always start with what does everybody think when they think about a vampire, because I want it to be both familiar enough to where people will be able to go, okay, that's a vampire and it feels like a vampire. But I want it to be different enough to where it's like, this is my Halloween Man version. Now, with vampires, the first thing I think about with vampires is vampires are usually very wealthy. A lot of the times they come from the aristocracy, at least in fiction. And, we think of Dracula, who is this, nobleman. And I started thinking about, well, what if that's how vampires actually like thought of themselves? They thought of themselves as actually like, we're better than everyone else. We're better than all the other monsters. And I literally made their blood. When vampires bleed in my comic, they bleed blue because they're blue bloods. And from there on, like I kind of extrapolated it. Like when you're a vampire, the way you're marked is how there's some folklore about, because you know, when we think of vampires in movies, like the way you become a vampire is you get bit. But when you get in the vampire folklore, there's all kinds of crazy ways you can become a vampire. You can become a vampire by committing suicide. You can become a vampire by being a werewolf while you were alive. You can become a vampire. A pumpkin become a vampire if it's been left out too long to rot after Halloween. And I actually did that one, by the way. There's an issue of Halloween Men about a vampire pumpkin. But one of the other things is if you were just an evil person in life, you can come back as a vampire because you're just such an SOB that the grave won't hold you. And I took that idea and I was like, well, okay, let's say if this is something, if vampires are this sort of super monster and they take great pride in how like they're the baddest of the bad, the more evil you were in life, the less human you look as a vampire. So like how powerful you are and how strong you are as a vampire. And I have crazy looking vampires in my comic. I have a character that's a recurring, he's probably the longest lived vampire. He's one of the only vampire characters that hasn't been killed off pretty quickly. I have a character in my comic called Dr. Owl. And he's a vampire that dates back to the Old West, and he has 6 arms. So like, imagine how terrible this guy was when he was alive. And when I think about like their personalities, again, going back to this idea of like aristocracy and thinking that like this classism, like when I think about like how to write them, I never, because I you know, a big thing is like, I'm fine with stories about sympathetic vampires. I think that, you know, folklore is out there and you should be able to do whatever you want to do with it. But I really wanted to try and make vampires that were scary. So the way I write vampires, instead of thinking like, okay, I'm going to write, you know, a romantic vampire or, you know, a Dracula type, I always think about the Nazis in Indiana Jones movies. I literally write, when I'm writing a vampire in my comic, I'm writing them as Nazis. And that may sound like an incredibly crazy thing to say, but it keeps like the sort of like tone of how I want them to behave.
Well, it makes, I mean, whenever you're going to put something into your comic that everyone knows, like for vampires, everyone knows the basic mythology of a vampire and what it can do. But then you've got to twist it to make yours unique so that people aren't like, oh, it's a typical vampire story. But then you also got to, like you said, keep that tone. You have to keep, now that you've created your own version of a vampire, now you got to keep it consistent so that they are familiar with a vampire. So if another vampire comes up, they'll be like, oh, I know exactly how this one's going to be. Whereas if you were just jumping around, they're not going to feel connected to your version of a vampire.
Yeah.
Oh, keep going.
Well, no. You first.
Oh, no, go for it. Go for it, Drew.
Well, like one last thing as far as vampires and popular monsters go, the thing that's fun about like being able to kind of cherry pick from different myths and different movies and things is that also like the stuff that I've put into my version of these creatures, like people can come in and go, oh, that was cool, I want to take that one aspect from it, and it can become part. That's how folklore works. And you know, folklore and pop culture are kind of interlinked that way, is that like someone can go, I really thought that was cool, I'm going to take that and run with it. And I hope people, you know, I hope when I do, you know, any monster that people think it's cool enough to where it's memorable.
So Chandra, what are your favorite mythological creatures that have been adapted into a different way? Like we said, oh, vampires, and then you could be like, oh, Twilight's my favorite version of a vampire.
Well, I was going to bring up Twilight for other reasons.
Oh, bring up Twilight real quick.
Okay, so like, so there's definitely a population that likes Twilight. So that woman, what was it, Stephanie Meyer? Yeah, she took the romantic aspect of vampires and twisted it towards her way. Of course, she ignored some of the established rules that we know as vampires, but she did it in her own way, and it identified with these people that like, oh, vampires don't have to be scary. They don't have to be that. They can sparkle in the sun, blah, blah, blah. They could be vegetarians and all this other stuff. And it's like, good for her. Good for everybody who likes that. But one of my favorite twists on the vampire lore was Only Lovers Left Alive, which is, it's a far better version of Twilight, but it is as if people had actually lived a long period of time and just became like, they're just citizens of the world and they're not trying to be intrusive or whatever. And it's like the whole movie is like a love letter to music too, and just like culture and whatnot. And it's Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston and the war doctor, what's his name?
Come on, dude. This is like your life. You should know these things.
That is a great. He was also Dr. Broom in the Hellboy movies, and I'm blanking on his name. That's a great movie. That's a great movie, though. I'm really glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you want to go with a fresh take on vampires that is not like spooky, whatever. I mean, there's
John
still
Hurt. Everyone in the chat is saying John Hurt.
John
Hurt. Yeah.
Yep.
That guy.
I like how I said war doctor, and I didn't use any other like reference because he's done everything. War doctor.
No, thank you guys in the chat who are listening intently. They all did it in caps. They're like, John Hurt.
Good movie.
What's that movie called?
Only Lovers Left Alive.
Only Lovers Left Alive. I'll have to check
it's Jarmuth. How do you say
Jim
his name?
Jarmusch.
Thank you.
He was an incredible director.
He really is. Like that movie. Like I said, music is so important at the heart of that movie. Just gorgeous, beautiful.
Speaking of vampires, have any of you guys seen that movie Daybreakers?
Daybreakers.
That's the one where vampire. It's Ethan Hawke, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting. I thought that was an interesting movie. I hadn't thought about it. I'll admit until you just mentioned it. But that's the guys that made that. They're Australian directors, and they did I believe a zombie movie prior to that one called Undead. I may be getting people mixed up, but that was an interesting. You would talk about like playing with mythology. That movie had some fun with it.
Yeah. Like that was my first time ever seeing I've never seen Twilight. I'm a Twilight virgin, so I don't know anything about Twilight.
Vampires don't play baseball.
By the way, if you want to watch I'm sure people love this movie, but if you want to watch a bad movie and get really stinking drunk and have a good time, Twilight might be your
cup of tea.
Yes.
That's fun.
By the way, another movie that's really good with taking the genre of vampires is What We Do in Shadows. From what's his name? I can never pronounce his name. He was the director of the last Thor movie.
Frick. Yeah, I can never say his name.
I'm not even gonna.
Waititi?
Yeah. I love him, and I don't know how to say his name, so I'm terrible fangirl. But that was a documentary style take on vampires, and so funny. And it's like from different periods of time, vampires, and they all live in a flat in New Zealand. And it again, like they bring in like a new guy who's like, "Oh yeah, have you seen me? I'm Twilight. Have you?" It's like hilarious movie. If you haven't watched that either, like a good double feature is Only Lovers Left Alive and What We Do in the Shadows. I actually did that as a double feature one night with my friend Dave.
What's that lovers movie again? I'm going to type it in so I can
Only Lovers Left Alive.
Only Lover. Oh, boom! It's the first thing that comes up. Perfect. I'll have to check that out. So I guess real quick, I want to. We've been going for like 39 minutes. I just want to hit up some people in the chat before we end this. So we had Britton. He said, I thought when you were talking about vampires, Drew, that your vampire was going to be a homeless vagrant. Mason Verger is my favorite villain in Hannibal. Have any of you guys read American Vampire by Scott Snyder? That's a comic book.
That's one I've always been wanting to get around to, and I haven't, but I've heard really, really great things about it.
I have the first volume.
Did Sean Murphy, did he just do covers or did he do interiors?
He did interiors for like a mini series of it.
I'm so like,
isn't Sean Murphy a great artist? Holy crap.
He's a colleague, but oh my God, Sean, I love you. Marry me.
Oh, you know Sean?
Married. I do know Sean, actually.
Wow, I'm now super jealous because he's one of my like favorite artists in the whole wide freaking world.
Mine too, dude. Mine too.
I wish he's so like private with his life, which, you know, good on him. But I would love if he would like do more YouTube videos just showing him drawing, because
have you seen some of his videos where he's drawing?
Yeah, I want more though. I want like I will watch a whole stream of him drawing.
Yeah,
he's incredible. So real quick, guys, before we end. Let me put everyone. I've been putting in the chat the link to Halloween Man on Comixology, so please give that a check out. And if you're interested, buy an issue. And if you're not convinced, let me real quick screen share once again this awesome cover by Chandra Free, and let's look at some of the interior art. Screen share this one. Share. Guys, come on! It's October. It's October 17th. October 31st is happening. Look at this awesome cover that Chandra drew. Look at this awesome text. Hello Tide, Part 1. You don't have to have been reading Halloween Man Mythology to get this. I mean, just look at the art. It's so consistent. I had a freaking fun time reading this. And you know, one thing I like is it Lewis who drew this?
Lewis is his name, yeah.
Yeah. Like for example, look, we got the characters as the main focus, but there's still the buildings in the background, and it still gives us a sense of location, whereas some RSA would just keep it blank and we have absolutely no idea where we are. He's just great at capturing the eye at where we need to be. So everyone, the link's in the chat. I'll put it in there one more time. Also, if you haven't backed the Kickstarter yet for Demons Volume 1, we've got 13 more days to go, and we're 150% funded as of last night. So check that out if you want to. I'm giving away we're including a $40-page digital book for all physical backers. So if you did a digital backing, now is probably the time to to move up to a physical backing. So real quick before we end, Chandra, I always at the end ask the people who are on the show, what advice can you give to people who are wanting to do art or make comics, you know, full time? If someone was like wanting to start right now, what advice would you give to them?
Don't do it. But seriously, when you're starting out, you need to have some other source of income. It's really hard. I don't know how I do it all the time without having another source of income. Actually, I do a side hustle. I walk a dog during the week. That's my side hustle. But there are many different avenues in which you can get to do your work. But obviously you want to get out there, have a social media presence. I know it's rough, but like place your artwork in front of people, like DeviantArt. I know it's an old example, but obviously it works.
Yeah, you guys freaking met there, so it works.
Yeah, and I mean, like, don't give up your dreams. It is going to suck a lot. This is why I'm like, don't do it. But you know, if you're gonna do it, love what you do and be dedicated and realize you're gonna go through some hard times.
No, for sure, for sure. And Drew, can you give us some parting advice before we end the show?
You know, her advice is remarkably similar to probably my own experience. you know, get the side hustle. There's no shame in that. You know, a lot of people kind of put a value on like, oh, I'm doing this full time. I'm doing this full time. You know, and you know, the whole idea of faking it until you make it. You know, I think that's kind of BS. You know, keep a roof over your head, keep your feet on the ground. You know, keep food in your stomach, that kind of thing. I've just had the best. I just turned 40. I just turned 40 in September, and I just thank you.
I'm glad we both
halfway done. But I just had the best year in my entire career, comics wise, and I'm gonna be putting, you know, at the end of the year, I've put out around 7 or 8 books, and I've had the most acclaim that I've had in my entire career. So what Chandra said about sticking with it, I back that up. You just got to be tenacious, and you got to be ornery, and you got to not give up on your dreams.
Boom, you guys heard it from them. And you know, Drew, Chandra, you guys are always welcome on the show. Drew, every time there's a new book, he hits me up, and we always make sure that we get him on as soon as
I love doing the show.
No, I freaking love you, and I always get some good views whenever I have you on as well, which is nice. So everyone, thanks so much. I put the link for Chandra's website and Drew's comic books in the chat. Check them out. Also, if you haven't checked out the Kickstarter, go into the description, subscribe, smash that like button, and comment, and just let us know what you think about folklore and mythology in your storytelling. And then we won't be doing another live chat session with creators until next week, but there's still going to be a video up either Thursday or Friday, most likely Thursday, which is tomorrow. So thanks everyone for watching. Peace out.
Night, y'all.
Bye.